What I saw from the Warriors against Manly was what they did well 2 years ago. It all comes down to really basic stuff. I think it's very important that they give them time, especially Metcalf. It's a whole new role for him. Following on from Johnson, you need to give somebody a red-hot crack. That's really should be on Dylan Brown to do that. And, I mean, he hasn't shown any signs, despite signing a massive deal, that he's capable of that.
DSPN, the Devlin Sports Podcast Network.
BLT, it's called Big League Tuesday, where we look back at the NRL. And our good friend Joel Gould from AAP out of Brisbane joins us. Welcome back, mate.
Oh, it's great to be with you again, man. Fantastic.
Yeah, well, and so has the competition been. I talked earlier on the show and said it was compelling, it's intriguing. It's just full of topsy-turvy results, upset results, unpredictability. It's all we want, isn't it?
Oh, exactly. I think after round one, there was a lot of people tipping teams like the Roosters and the Warriors to fight it out for the wooden spoon. But now, of course, one of those two teams is going to be 2 from 3 because they play each other this weekend, and they've both turned in remarkable performances. That's what people want to see, I think.
Yep.
They want to see an even competition. And I think in the first 6 rounds, we're going to see a lot of this topsy-turvy. You won't be able to pick too many rounds, I wouldn't think.
So you're thinking that, we can make all kinds of assumptions early, but sort of just tie-ho on that and wait till 5 or 6 weeks, and most teams would have played 5 or 6 games by that stage with the byes and so forth, and then we can actually start looking at it and going, okay, maybe there's some patterns.
I think so, really, because a quarter of the season I always think you need just to get a sense of how teams are going to play. And I think 2 rounds isn't enough, really. Okay. We've seen a lot of teams lead the competition after 2 rounds and not make the 8, and we've seen teams that have been out of haven't even won the first 3 weeks. I think of the Cowboys in 2015. They lost their first 3 and won the comp. So we really can't go on what we've seen to make a long-term prediction. But there's some signs, there's some good signs for some of those teams that played poorly in round 1.
Yeah, okay, so let's start with the Warriors, because obviously they're big noise back here at home. And look, it was such an awful performance against Canberra in Las Vegas. There was nothing at all good to take about that. Maybe Roger Tuivasa-Sheck, only him. But to turn it around against a Manly side that had come off putting 40 points up against the Cowboys with that big pack of theirs and everything else, how surprised were you by that 36-16 scoreline?
To be honest, I wasn't totally surprised at all, because I was surprised how the Warriors went last year. I thought they were going to have a really good year and certainly be a top 4 side. What I saw from the Warriors against Manly was what they did well 2 years ago.
Right.
If you look at the game, it all comes down to really basic stuff. Barnett and Fisher-Harris enormous, Wade Egan crafty, and then Metcalf I thought had one of his best games. Harris Tavita running the football was a big plus for the Warriors, and I think he showed how dangerous he can be. And the back 5 were just fantastic, Roger and Chance. So that's the formula for the Warriors to win every week. If they stick to what they did, and they were patient too, they didn't panic. I think last year sometimes they went out to a lead and panicked. Last year I don't think they would have come back from that start the way they did, or if they did, they would have then conceded again. They seemed to do that a lot of the time last year. I like the look of the formula. Okay. I just think if they stick to that, they're going to win more games than they lose.
We've had a lot of comments come on about the spine and about sticking with that spine. And obviously, unless injury happens, it's going to change it. But your thoughts just on Egan and Metcalf going through Harris Tavita to Chance. Is that going to be good enough as the competition progresses? And how important that they stay together and actually give those guys time?
I think it's very important that they give them time, especially Metcalf. It's a whole new role for him, obviously. He had that injury
last year,
last year. And I think following on from Johnson, you need to give somebody a red-hot crack, especially the number 7 jersey. I think those two are probably a bit similar to Brimson and Campbell for Titans in one regard, in that they're running players. Although I saw some really good signs from both of them that they're more than that. So definitely let them settle into the role. But I think Egan he's the great mind, isn't he, of the Warriors? Like, he's a player that could easily slot into playing Origin football. He wouldn't bat an eyelid. He'd do it easily. Well, not easily, but he'd do it. So he's a key. And Chan's at his best. He's obviously one of the better fullbacks in the game. So that's a very good spine. It's got a lot of talent, but it just needs to play to its strength. And I think they found the way to do it on the weekend on the back of a really good forward display where there's some really quick play the balls too.
Yeah, really aggressive forward display, yeah. I thought they were very, very committed up front as opposed to, letting Canberra get away with so many offloads in Vegas. And looking at, and Canberra included Souths, Knights, Dogs, Raiders. 4 teams that are 2-0. Only 2 of those made the 8 last year, and the Knights were very, very close with the Raiders, obviously, in points differential. But those 4 teams, can you see? Because if these 4 make the 8, there's going to be a couple that were in the 8 that miss out. So just I know it's only 2 games in, but Souths, Raiders, Knights, and Dogs 2-0. Would you have thought that those 4 teams would be in the positions that they're in?
No, I wouldn't have. I wouldn't have thought all 4 of them would be 2-0. The Bulldogs, yes, I could see that happening. I think they're going to be definitely a top 6 side. Whether they can make the top 4 or not, I'm not sure, but they'll definitely be a top 4 side.
They've got the depth to cater for losses like to Burton and Kikau they're going to have too, because they can get around that. The surprise for me of those teams, I would say so far, would be the Knights for sure. They're looking a lot better than I thought they would. Their pack's really doing a very good job, but that back line at the moment, it's on fire. And Callum Ponga's the link man. So long as he's playing for Newcastle and their pack, which is tough, does what they're doing, I can see them staying in the top 4. South Sydney, for Wayne Bennett, it's always been, and ever since he was at the Broncos, it's always been about banking points, as many as he can in those first 10 rounds. And Craig Bellamy at the Melbourne Storm has been the master of this the last 20 years. Because Wayne knows that those points in the bank is so important when you're under strength. So can South Sydney make the 8 and stay there? Yes, I'll stay up where they are. They can, because they've got Latrell Mitchell, Cameron Murray to come back into the side, and Alex Johnson at various stages of the season. But they can't afford to give themselves too much to do. So they need to keep, I think they need to keep winning these tight, tough games, which is what Wayne's been really good at. And as for the Raiders, well, if Corey Horsburgh and Josh Papali'i play like they did, and those back rowers, Hudson Young and the new guy from England, Nicholson, if they can keep playing like that, I don't see any reason why they can't stay there. But look, once we say all these teams are making the top 8, we ask the question, well, who's dropping out of the big guns? So,
So we've got 14 teams in the 8. I mean, that's how we start.
We've got 14 teams in the 8. Yeah, I don't think all 4 of them will stay there.
Okay,
no, I'm not sure. I think injuries will play a part in one of those teams at least.
As far as those at the bottom, 0-2, St. George, a couple of narrow losses for them. You've got the Cowboys, and they've only scored 12 points in each of the games that they've played. The Eels are 0-2, and Dolphins as well. I feel like the Dolphins without Wayne, they've kind of that euphoria of them coming into the combo. I wonder if they're going to slide down the table. The Eels look terrible, don't they? And your thoughts also on the Cowboys. But those 4 teams at 0-2, all 4 of them, give us that.
Well, I think all those teams are going to struggle to get into the top 8 unless there's massive changes. The Dolphins, I think, have had some adversity in the first 2 rounds. They've been obviously having to contend with being away from home with the cyclone, and then they had to go down early to prepare for Newcastle. 40 teams are professional. They should be able to get around that. Their biggest problem, I think, from the first 2 rounds, how slow are they? They're slow as wet weeks. Like nothing happens at any speed. Only Josh Kerr, he plays the ball quickly. I think he's going to be very important to them because apart from him, I think a lot of them are playing the ball at over 4 seconds in the forward pack, which is way too long. So that's their problem. The Dragons seem to just can't get away from bad habits. Positions to win games like they were last week, and no one wanted to stand up and win it. That's going to have to change. And I'm not sold on their halves, Flanagan and Ilias. I don't think they're going to. I don't think they're sort of halves that can really steer you into the top 8 on the back of a pack that's everyone concedes. I think is lacking a bit of oomph. So those two, the Cowboys are in a world of hurt. A world of hurt.
Yeah, man.
I just can't believe the poor attack of the Cowboys. Like they've always, even when they've had defensive liabilities, they've always been a very good attacking side, and I think the loss of Valentine Holmes and Felt very much hurts them. But they're small. Well, I think Bateman ran for the most metres last week against Cronulla, and he didn't get to 100. So they can't continue like that. And otherwise, they're going to get monstered, and their outside backs and even their halves, it's a new combination. And so you've got a rookie halfback at the moment, unless Clifford is brought back into the picture. So I just think I don't see any way out for the Cowboys. They've got Taumalolo coming back into the side, and they need him big time.
As for the Eels, have they got the wooden spoon already?
I wouldn't say they've got the wooden spoon already, no, because you just don't know what's going to happen to Parramatta and some of the other sides. But the Cowboys can't continue like they are and not finish in the top 2.
No, so I meant the Eels.
Sorry, in the bottom 2.
Their Eels side, they look terrible, don't they?
They really do. They really do look terrible. A lot of young players, new players, a new halfback in Volkman. Can't be expected to run a side with the amount of NRL games that he's played.
That really should be on Dylan Brown to do that. And, I mean, he hasn't shown any signs, despite signing a massive deal, that he's capable of that in the first 2 weeks, although his pack has been very ordinary. I've been very disappointed in some of their Junior Barlow, for instance, very disappointed in his performances. He hasn't really shown that sort of leadership I would have expected from him. So they look like a rabble, to be honest. A side that can't score until the last minute against West Tigers has got a problem.
Yeah, they're almost blanked, yeah. You're right.
I think the Eels at the moment, if you wanted to create a market, the Eels would be the short price favourites for the wooden spoon, but the Cowboys wouldn't be too far behind them.
Well, we got nothing to worry about. Penrith, I mean, it seems such a stupid question, doesn't it? What they've won 4 in a row. They were the minor premiers previous to that, and they got to the grand final and they've lost. Okay, they've lost a game at home. They conceded 38 points, but this isn't a sign of anything other than they just lost the game.
I don't think so. No, I think we've seen Penrith in recent years start the season quite slowly. You're losing World Club challenges. Last year against Melbourne, they didn't score a point. That was a very good game, though. I think Melbourne won 8-0 in that match. So this was totally different to that performance. Where they would not be impressed with their defence. I think the coach hit on it. They certainly underestimated the Roosters. No question.
Yeah.
You can't do that.
That's what the comp is, bites you, doesn't it?
What's that?
The comp bites you, man. I mean, this is what I love about this competition. If you do it, and you felt like that. Look, if you actually seriously put money on the Warriors to beat Manly and then backed it up with the Roosters, you would have made an absolute killing. I don't know anyone that honestly would have predicted the wins of both of those games.
No, I don't know anyone that's tipped those 2 results. I'm sure someone has, but I don't know who they are.
Yeah.
I know in my footy tipping competition there was some really, really bad scores and people right down on 1 and 2. So, yeah, it's very hard to imagine. But back to your question on Penrith, I think it's going to be harder this year for them to accumulate as many points. They don't have the Penrith Park advantage, which is a huge advantage for them when it's sold out. Very intimidating suburban ground to play at. So they've got to play their home games in Parramatta, which is not going to be, I don't think, as daunting a prospect for the away teams and not as big an advantage for them. So I think the only question mark I would have over Penrith is, can they finish in the top 4? Are they going to be able to accumulate enough competition points, especially during Origin, to stay there? That might, I think, come finals time, they'll switch on and could do anything.
Yep.
I just don't think they're going to be as dominant throughout the season. I think the defensive efforts in those first 2 games might show you that how hard it is to maintain the standard that they had
Yeah.
so long.
Fascinating first 2 rounds. Brilliant, isn't it? As I said right at the very start, what a way to kick the competition off.
Oh, amazing way to kick it off, and let's hope it continues. And like I said before, like it's remarkable that the Warriors are hosting the Roosters with one of those teams.
Going 2-1.
Will go 2 and they'll have a better win rate than loss rate unless it's an extra time draw. So who would have thought that would be the case after the first round? And that's what makes it so intriguing. We really don't know who's going to win out of the Warriors and the Roosters. It could go either way, couldn't it, really?
One of them will be in the top 4, though, you'd think, at the end of the weekend.
Exactly. That's right. And that would be a huge confidence boost to whichever side that is. If it's the Warriors, they'll get a huge amount out of that. If it's the Roosters, well, they'll be just over the moon to have beaten the defending 4-time premiers and then gone to New Zealand, which is such a tough place to play, be a sold-out crowd. Very tough for those young blokes at the Roosters to back it up. So I'm really looking forward to that.
Friday night,
match.
yeah. Joel, always a pleasure, mate. Thanks so much for joining us from AAP out of Brisbane.
No, thank you very much for having me. Pleasure.
This is the DSPN.